Well, good morning, everybody. First, let me say thank you for your attention to this case and participation during the jury selection last Friday. I know that gets a little mundane at times, and it's the kind of thing they never show in the movies because it is so dull. No offense, Judge Ramirez, but we appreciate you participating and giving some honest answers to us, and more importantly, going forward, we thank you for your dedication to this trial over the next 2 weeks. We realize fully that, this takes a lot out of your personal lives, your professional lives, and we appreciate that. So what I'm about to tell you is an opening statement, which is really a framework for you just to understand the evidence. You can kind of think of it like a movie trailer, right? I'm certainly not going to detail for you every little aspect of this case, but I'm going to kind of give you a general sense of what you can expect to see, right, in the coming days of this trial. If you could put up the PowerPoint, please. I just want to share with you 2 photographs as I speak with you this morning here. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Stephanie Pavlons. She is the person who is the subject of this homicide trial. She's a person you will not hear from directly in this case. This is Stephanie as she was enjoying life one day. The next photograph, please. This also is Stephanie Pavlons. And this is what the case centers on, right? How did she end up dead in the woods in the town of Delafield in 2022? That's what the case is about. How did she get like this? You're going to hear a lot of testimony, ladies and gentlemen, and the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is be patient, right? This is a pretty complex case. It's not as if I can put one witness on the stand and have him or her explain the whole thing to you and we can be done in a day, right? You can realize if we're telling you this is going to take 2 weeks, you're going to have to be a little bit patient. You're given the opportunity to take notes. If that's something you're comfortable with, I would encourage you to take notes because there's a lot. There's a lot to keep track of. Maybe you're one of these guys that can just see it and hear it once and you're good. That's fine too. But the evidence that we're going to present to you through the course of these next 2 weeks is a culmination of a lengthy investigation, okay? You're going to hear that the Stephanie sadly was discovered by a construction crew who was out working in the area on the date of September 9, 2022. And you will hear that the reason they discovered her body is because there was an overwhelming odor as they were out working in the area. And that's what drew their attention to the woods and made them go into the woods to explore. And of course, made this horrible discovery. When investigators were first at the scene, along with the medical examiner and members of her staff, they could not even tell the gender of this person because the body had been so grossly decomposed over time. Judge Ramirez had warned you on Friday, some of these details are going to be a little bit gruesome, and we do apologize for that, but it's really important for you to know. The condition of the body when they found it was decomposed largely by insect infestation, maggots, so that her entire neck and face area was pretty much gone. There's no soft tissue. And I don't mean to sound flip, but her appearance was kind of similar to one of the Halloween skeletons you would see in your neighbor's yard this time of year, because there was no flesh, no soft tissue remaining. Stephanie Pavlons was 44 years old when she died. And you were going to hear a little bit of background about Stephanie, who she was. It's our understanding she grew up in Delafield. Her parents, Richard and Georgianne, longtime residents. I think they said they lived in their house more than 50 years in the city of Delafield. And she's a young woman, probably about 24, 25 years ago now. She met the defendant, Matthew Pahl, at a bowling alley. And the two became involved with each other and remained involved in each other's lives till 2022. In fact, they had a child in common. They had a daughter born to them in 2003, Layla. They had never married. Their relationship is described by friends and family as on again, off again. It was obviously a personal relationship. They'd come in and out of each other's lives. They lived together. And then Stephanie would go back and stay with her parents for a time or two, and then they get back together. In 2022, the defendant, Matthew Pahl, had an apartment right on the other side of the golf course here, just down the street from us, off of Delafield Street in the city of Waukesha. And at that same time, we will present evidence to you that he was involved in an online relationship with two women in the Philippines, women that he had met through some kind of dating website or online chat room or something of that sort. And he was deeply involved with these women. This wasn't just like every now and then he'd chat them up and say, how's it going? He would talk to them on a daily basis. He became involved in an online sexual relationship with them. He would talk to them frequently. And he began to make plans to move to the Philippines with an intention, it seemed, to be involved in a personal or sexual relationship with one or both of them. He would describe Stephanie to these people as just a coworker or an employee. This all became derailed, his plan to move to the Philippines, in about June or July of 2022, when he injured his foot in some type of accident, his foot or his ankle. And it laid him up. He was on crutches. He was in a walking cast or a boot type of thing. And he was struggling to the point where he had to rely on Stephanie more and more to help him with his daily cares, because if you've ever been on crutches, you know it's not easy just to grocery shop, right? So he starts relying on Stephanie more and more. She's much more involved in his life around this time, beginning in the summer of 2022. And this derails his plans to move to the Philippines. He had been hoping to get there by the end of the summer. He also starts treatment at Orthopedic Associates of Wisconsin on Gulf Road in the town of Delafield. Physical therapy. We talked about that on Friday. A lot of people have been there for physical therapy, right? Nothing unusual about that. But what is so significant about that is the date of August 23, 2022. That's a day you're going to hear a lot about. By the end of this trial, you'll be able to repeat it back to me, August 23 of 2022. Because that's the day we believe he killed Stephanie Pavlons in the woods just outside of Orthopedic Associates and right up against the golf course at Western Lakes. On that day, we will be able to prove to you that Mr. Pahl had an appointment at Orthopedic Associates. We will be able to prove to you that he and Stephanie left the apartment in Waukesha here, drove northbound on Delafield Street up to Grandview Boulevard, took a right, headed north up Grandview Boulevard, crossed Silvernail, where the old gas house used to be there, crossed I-94, crossed Gulf Road, and not crossed Gulf Road, got the Gulf Road, took a left. The new DMV station is up there right now. You may be familiar with that intersection. You will hear testimony that they stopped at the Quick Trip at that location, stayed there for about 20 minutes. Stephanie goes in, buys some breakfast food. Apparently they sit in the car, eat breakfast. Importantly, you will hear that they leave Quick Trip at about 9:11 a.m. and they arrive at the parking lot of Orthopedic Associates at 9:16 a.m. This will be proven by cell phone records. He arrives in the parking lot at 9:16 a.m., but he doesn't check in for his appointment until 9:34 a.m. So there's about a 16-minute gap there. He goes into his appointment. We will present records to you from the clinic. He's seen by a therapist at about 9:38 a.m. He goes back to meet with the therapist, and he's released at 10:33 a.m. The appointment is over. You will hear, based on cell phone records, that again, he goes out, well, strike that. Released at 10:33 a.m. You will hear from cell phone records that he does not leave the parking lot in the area of Orthopedic Associates until 10:53 a.m. During these two gaps, the 16-minute gap before the appointment and the 20-minute gap after the appointment, we have no idea where Mr. Pahl is or what he's doing. There's no activity on his phone. He's not moving anywhere. There's nothing that we could find that tells us what he's up to during these gaps of time. Also, on August 23 of 2022, from the time Stephanie Pavlons leaves that quick trip, and you'll see her drive out of the parking lot on a video, no one ever hears from her again. She doesn't talk to anybody. She's not seen by anybody. There's no video of her anywhere. She gets missed calls on her phone. She's not replying to calls. She's not responding to calls. She's not picking up her prescriptions. She's missing doctor appointments. She's gone. On September 9th of 2022 is the day the body is discovered. I just told you that. It's about 17 days between August 23 and September 9th of 2022. Well, what's Mr. Pahl doing during this time? Pretty much going on with his life. In fact, you may see some videos that you watch and you may conclude doesn't seem to have a care in the world. He continues chatting with the women in the Philippines. He continues making his plans to go to the Philippines, saying, I'll be there by the end of the fall. I just got to finish this treatment and I'll be there. But he's also saying some curious things to these women in the Philippines. And he also starts talking to his dad. Hadn't talked to him since June. Suddenly he's talking to his dad frequently. He's traveling up to Jackson off of Highway 60 to visit with his dad. His dad's coming down to his apartment. And he's telling his dad and he's telling his girlfriends something bad happened. But I can't send it in a text message. I can't talk about it in writing. We'll have to talk about it on the phone. He says he's worried about somebody. He even tells his dad he thinks he's in some kind of trouble. He also starts doing Google searches. He's searching for Stephanie Pavlons' name in the obituaries. He's searching he's searching Google, just doing Google searches on her name. At this point, nothing had been made public about her death. There was a brief news article the day the body was found. But prior to the body even being found, he's looking up the obituaries for Stephanie Pavlons. He's Google searching her name. And he's got an app on his phone that's a police scanner. And he's checking that frequently, checking in what are the cops up to? What are the cops investigating nowadays? What kind of scene are they getting called to? All of this evidence will be presented to you. The one thing he doesn't do, the one thing Matthew Pahl does not do, ladies and gentlemen, that you will hear during this trial, is alert anybody to the fact that Stephanie is missing. He doesn't call her parents. He doesn't call the police. He doesn't ask the neighbors. He doesn't even call their own daughter. He doesn't lift one finger to alert anybody to the fact that Stephanie is gone. In fact, it's not until September 17th of 2022 that police go to his apartment with a search warrant to look for evidence. And that's the first chance they get to talk to Mr. Pahl about this. And what does he do? He lies. He lies about when he had last seen Stephanie. He lies about her whereabouts. He lies about her belongings. He lies about his own whereabouts. He lies. What he does, again, is try and cover his tracks. He tries to deflect the police and starts talking about Stephanie and her history. You see, Stephanie did have a hard life. There's no getting around it. There were times she felt hopeless. There were times she felt sad, depressed, lonely. She kept a journal. You'll hear some of these journal entries where she describes the despair that she's feeling in her life. And it will also be very clear from her journal entries that the cause of her despair and her hopelessness was the abuse that had been inflicted upon her by the defendant, Matthew Pahl. There was verbal abuse, emotional abuse, telling her she's stupid, she can't do anything right. There was physical abuse that she documented in her own journal. There was an occasion where she reported he hit her over the head with a bottle 5 or 6 times. There was an occasion where she reported he kicked her or punched her in the tailbone so bad she couldn't walk for days. There was an occasion where she reported he slapped her so hard in the face, around the side of the face, it broke an eardrum. She got medical treatment for that. She will describe Mr. Pahl as Jekyll and Hyde, somebody that can snap on a dime. The defendant, Mr. Pahl, tries to use this history for his own benefit. Again, cast the shadow a different way to the cops. I think she wandered off or maybe killed herself because, you know, she has this history. She's thought about suicide in the past. That's his answer to the officers on January 17th of 2022. Now, this investigation was lengthy. It took a year for the detectives to put this whole case together. And that's why it's going to take us 2 weeks to present it to you, right? The officers executed search warrants. They collected evidence. They interviewed witnesses. They subpoenaed or got warrants for all kinds of records, cell phone records, bank records, medical records, email records, messaging app records, video surveillance, anything they could to kind of document this, they did it. They seized computers and cell phones, and then they have computer forensic experts who extracted the data off the phone. You're going to hear a lot of testimony about that. They even enlisted the help of a human remains detection dog, or a cadaver dog. This is a canine that's trained specifically to detect the odor of decomposing human remains, just like you might see a dog at an airport detecting bombs or drugs or something like that. This dog has a unique training, and she is trained to detect decomposing human remains. You will hear testimony that this dog searched Mr. Pahl's vehicle and gave a positive alert. She hit on the car, indicating she could smell decomposing human remains in his truck. So this is all kind of an overview of the type of evidence we're going to present to you. There's one thing we won't be able to present to you, and that's the cause of death. And you may say, how in the world are you going to prove a murder case when you don't know how she died? Well, Judge Ramirez will instruct you on the law at the end of the trial. And he's going to tell you that, in fact, the burden of proof on the state of Wisconsin is not to prove how she died. You will not be asked that at the end of the case. You will be asked, did Matthew Pahl intentionally kill Stephanie Pavlons? Is he guilty of that allegation by the state or not guilty? The fact is, Dr. Scheel, our medical examiner, will tell you that the body was decomposed so badly she couldn't make a lot of her normal findings that she could otherwise. Most of the major organs were missing. soft tissues missing from crucial areas on the body. The rest of the body was dark and discolored, leathery type skin from being out in the elements for 17 days. And that's why you have count 2, which is hiding a corpse, right? Because we believe the evidence will show you that this was all at the hands of Matthew Pahl. He purposely left her in the woods in a spot where she wouldn't be found for 17 days to his advantage. Now the medical examiner can't even tell us what caused her death. That's why there's a law that prohibits people from hiding a corpse. We believe there's going to be a lot of evidence of him covering his tracks. He tells one of the girlfriends in the Philippines he's going to be ready when the cops come. He deletes text messages. He does all kinds of things to cover up. So, again, I'm asking you to be patient and pay good attention, because every witness has something important to tell you, right? Not one witness is going to tell you the whole story, but everybody has one little thing. And we believe that at the end, when we have presented our entire case to you, you will be convinced that Matthew Pahl is guilty of these charges we've levied against him. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence we will present to you is a timeline of his activities to the best of our ability to piece it together between August 23 and September 9 of 2022. And you're going to see from that timeline that we have painted him into such a very small corner. The only reasonable conclusion you can reach is that he's guilty of killing Stephanie Pavlons in an intentional act. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I wanted to thank you again. Attorney Galaviz and I will be presenting the case for Mr. Pahl. And I also wanted to thank you for spending the time here and making sure that Matthew gets a fair trial. One night last week, I was at home sitting at the kitchen table going over some evidence in this case. My wife arrived home, fed the dogs, changed into sweats, and popped some kind of pre-made dinner from Costco into the oven. She reminded me that our daughter's birthday was in a few days, and we were planning on taking her out to dinner. See, Melanie is a sophomore in the dorms at Marquette. Christine decided she would make a cake for Melanie. We did not have cake mix at the house, so she decided to make the cake from scratch. I offered to help, but Christine does not allow me to bake. She trusts me to cook dinners. In fact, I actually do most of the cooking for the family, but she does not trust me to bake. You see, cooking is an art, whereas baking is a science. I simply cannot, more like I do not want to follow specific recipes. So I stayed at the table and continued to go over police reports. Christine opened her laptop, Googled a recipe, chocolate cake from scratch, then went to our pantry to start looking for ingredients. All the basics: flour, sugar, cocoa powder, salt, a few items from the refrigerator, milk and eggs. Christine had most everything spread across the kitchen counter, then went back into the pantry. She was searching every shelf. I asked what she was looking for. Not that I would know where anything was. She finally said baking powder. The recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I pictured in my head how little 2 teaspoons is. How could that really make a difference? Neither of us wanted to leave the house and drive to the store. After a bit of discussion, I finally won the argument. Christine agreed to go ahead and follow the recipe for chocolate cake, less the baking powder. She pulled dinner from the oven, lowered the temperature, and put the cake in. We enjoyed our dinner. 30 minutes later, dinner was eaten, the table and counters were cleaned up, and the oven buzzer notified us the cake was done. Christine turned off the oven, opened the door, and pulled the cake pans from the pulled the cake pans from the oven, and then she called me over. We both stared at the cake pans on the counter. While I may have won the argument about skipping baking powder, I knew I lost. I would be driving to the store the next day and hitting the bakery for a cake. I sat back down on the table and started reading police reports. Then I realized that this cake and criminal trials in general are like a recipe. Again, this is a criminal case. Over my 10 years as a police officer, then 23 years as a lawyer, I've learned that criminal cases are more important than regulatory actions, commercial litigation, and every other type of case. Criminal cases involve the most serious kind of government action and core individual rights and liberties. There is just more at stake, ladies and gentlemen, in a criminal case, so this process is really important. In the spectrum of legal proceedings, a criminal case is up here and everything else is down here. The government, through the district attorney, must have all the ingredients. Without those necessary ingredients, the accused person must be found not guilty. You will find this case very interesting. This is my client, Matthew Pahl. You've heard the elements for the two charged offenses. You heard them on Friday. You'll hear them again throughout the case. You've heard the government's belief about what may have happened in August and September of 2022. No witnesses will be able to testify with any certainty how Stephanie Pavlons' life came to an end. In a homicide case, the government always relies upon the testimony of one critical witness, that being the medical examiner. In this case, the Waukesha County medical examiner will testify that despite exhaustive testing and investigation, they can sum up the conclusion about the manner and cause of Stephanie's death in one word: undetermined. For you, the jury, a thorough analysis of the facts and circumstances in this case is critical. For you to find Matthew guilty, you must find that the elements of the offenses have been proven by the government, and proven by the government beyond a reasonable doubt. I cannot be sure how each witness will testify, nor do I know how the judge may rule on any objections. What do we know for sure? We know Matthew Pahl and Stephanie Pavlons had been in some type of relationship for well over 23 years. They have an adult daughter together. We know Matthew and Stephanie were never married. They had an on-again, off-again relationship. Stephanie spent periods of time with Matthew, then spent extended periods of time with her at her parents' house in Delafield. We know throughout 2001 and 2002, Matthew had been communicating regularly with at least two girls in the Philippines. Stephanie was not only aware of this, but she also communicated with at least one of them. We know also that Matthew and Stephanie had medical issues and were taking prescription medication. We know Stephanie had a history of mental health issues. We know in the summer of 2022, May 23rd, Matthew broke his foot and needed to go through months of physical therapy. We also know Stephanie stayed at Matthew's apartment the night of August 22nd, 2022. And the next morning they left the apartment building and drove to Orthopedic Associates in the town of Delafield. They stopped at Quick Trip, as the state indicated. Matt attended his regular scheduled therapy appointment, then drove directly back to his apartment. Stephanie was no longer with him. We know that on September 9th, 2022, some workers were placing no trespassing signs along a small wooded area east of Orthopedic Associates and located Stephanie Pavlons' body. Finally, we know the Waukesha medical examiner cannot determine the cause or manner of death. You also heard from the state that Matthew did not report Stephanie missing to the police, but neither did anyone else. Not her daughter Layla, and not her parents. When you see certain evidence and hear certain testimony, you may not like Matthew Pahl, but you don't have to like him. This isn't a popularity contest. This is a criminal trial, and what you as a jury have to do is examine the evidence, listen carefully to the testimony, and make sure the elements of the charged offense have been met. If not, then you must find Matthew not guilty. The investigation into Stephanie's death involved the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department, the Racine County Sheriff's Department, several area police departments, the Waukesha County Medical Examiner, and the State Crime Lab, among others. Well over 12 search warrants, at least 10 subpoenas, citizen interviews, countless hours scouring electronic media. Again, this was a very, very thorough investigation. There are a couple questions I want you to ask yourself when the government presents its case. Ask, how did Stephanie get from the front seat of Matt's truck to the small wooded area where she was found? Keep in mind, her body was found in a wooded area that is bound by a heavily traveled frontage road and interstate, a very busy health center, a golf course, and homes. Ask, if Matt carried Stephanie into that wooded area, when would he have done that? Keep in mind, the government has hundreds of hours of camera footage and cell phone mapping. Keep in mind, Matt was still dealing with a broken foot. Finally, ask, what proof does the government have that Stephanie was even killed by another person? It could have been suicide, it could have been medical issues, it could have been anything. I do agree with some of the things the prosecutor said. However, there are issues in this case, and those issues will support reasonable doubt. In a criminal case, the government, having the burden of proof, presents evidence first. Only after the prosecutor has presented their case will Matthew have the opportunity to present his case. We ask that each of you wait until you've heard from all of the witnesses, ours as well as theirs, before deciding what really happened. Further, I believe the government will not be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Matthew Pahl committed the offenses for which he is charged. We expect that after you deliberate and carefully weigh the evidence in this case, you'll return the only possible verdict, and that's a verdict of not guilty. Listen for the facts that support what the government is alleging. Listen for what can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And listen for those ingredients that the government must have for their cake, and be aware of what is missing. Thank you.